So my question is, in case of doubt, who will be rescued when the worst comes to the worst, and who will not? And of the questions in the box, I pulled this one out because it speaks to so many of the issues that are becoming very clear in this COVID moment. In fact, the virus is not supposed to know who it's affecting and who it's not. It's supposed to be an equalizing virus in how it goes about in the world, but we're beginning to see that it's devastating communities of color. It's devastating Black and minority communities much more than it is devastating other communities. And so the virus is in fact highlighting for us the inequalities of our world. So we come to understand that the virus might not have eyes, but it is helping us to see the inequities of our world. Consequently, it is very clear to me who will and will not be rescued if the worst comes to the worst, and who will not be triaged if the worst comes to the worst. We only have to look at all the stops that were pulled out, for example, to help and to protect and to safeguard the life, for example, of Boris Johnson when he came down with the illness. He's, of course, at the apex of British society, white, male, powerful. And that stands in contradistinction to so many Black, poor, minority people who have died from this virus. So if the worst comes to the worst, Black people, people of color, poor people will be the first to go as they're going now. And I think it's important to recognize that. Thank you.
Hello. The question that I chose to answer tonight is what made me feel comfortable during the COVID-19 period. Well, one thing comes to mind is that it was terribly comforting to feel that we were all in the same boat. And when we locked down eventually, I found that I was in a cocoon and that I was protected within my house, and not going out became so comforting, and knowing that all my friends and all the people that I love were also sharing the same moment. So that was incredibly special, and knowing through Skype, Zoom and telephone calls that they were of course well as well. So for 6 days I didn't leave the flat, and I just walked around the flat to make sure that I exercised, and I found myself feeling amazing and doing things that I've never done, like read books that have been waiting on my shelves for a long time, and this was really wonderful.
My question is about what we learn from others in the pandemic, what we learn about ourselves and what we learn about basically the human condition. And I am particularly obsessed with the way in which the pandemic has exacerbated or exaggerated some of our personal fears and our personal challenges. Every person I've met during the pandemic, if I know them well, the anxiety comes out in a particular character trait, including myself. Some of the people I work with, for example, have to email quite a lot and get their anxiety out through clarity. Other people want to reach out and communicate and maybe over communicate and send very long texts after long text after long text. So every one of us, there's something about how we connect with others that is kind of amped up and needing some kind of affinity or recognition. And it's very hard to see where that need can be met at a time when things are very difficult for everybody. So that's my answer to this question. In retrospect, I have really hid out for 8 months in a building without going out, I haven't entered a grocery store until the last 2 weeks. And I was in the United States, and I just would not enter any space. The death rate in Houston, Texas has been 500 people a day. Here in the Vaucluse in France, the total is 42 people. The scale of things is different in every place, and it makes one have an embodied sensation of something very, very different depending on where you are, and very different upon like the culture you're in, who you're with, everything else. So I really find this moment to be at least a humbling experience for everyone. Hopefully people are open to that. But also one of growth, because we get to learn where we have needs and where we kind of lash out, where we kind of need to be addressed. And so I want to just acknowledge that in our time. My name is...
I think what is important for the future is nature, trees, nature in the towns, trees everywhere, peaceful places where you're just in a green, colorful, very healthy place, and you're quiet. And we should maybe all ask the question to ourselves, like Bruno Latour suggested it. What are all the things we did before that we are ready to abandon, to let beside for the next years, for the next civilization? Well, huge program.
So, my question is, what is the new normal? That's an interesting question because there are many answers to that, and I give the answer that is possibly the most optimistic and most inspired one, because I had so many talks in the last 3 weeks here, talking about the outcome, the impact of COVID-19. I spoke to people here in France, in Germany, with German artists who are here, but also with people from all over the world. I spoke to refugees in Syria and women rights activists in Baghdad, with people from Brazil. And it was interesting that for so many people at the end of a long interview, when I asked them, what gives you hope for the future? Is there anything good that might come out of this pandemic? All the people say, solidarity. It would be so great if solidarity would be the answer. So, what is the new normal? It would be great if that would be a global solidarity. Thank you.
Ma question est What is your hope for the future? Quel est votre espoir pour l'avenir? Pour moi, c'est une chance qu'on a eu d'avoir cette crise, même si voilà, c'est un moment très dur, qu'il y a eu des morts, mais c'est un temps qui nous a permis de réfléchir, chacun de manière individuelle et de manière collective, à comment on avait envie de vivre et d'arrêter de subir une façon de vivre qui ne nous correspond pas, à notre humanité, mais qui ne correspond pas aussi au monde que l'on habite. J'espère qu'en tout cas que les gens vont arriver à faire face à cette difficulté, à cette fragilité de l'existence avec courage et sans se laisser prendre par la peur et en s'affranchissant aussi de ce que les États nous disent, s'affranchissant du contrôle pour eux-mêmes agir dans la lignée comme ils ont envie d'agir, en harmonie avec les autres hommes et en harmonie avec le monde, en fait, leur environnement. J'espère que ce moment de fragilité va nous permettre d'être à l'écoute de soi, des autres et de la nature. Et ça tourne.
Salut. Alors la question que j'ai choisie et qui est venue à moi, c'est la protection de l'ensemble est-elle plus importante que celle de ses parties? Moi je pense qu'il n'y a que le mouvement qui existe. Tout n'est que mouvement. La force est une illusion. Voilà, c'est tout. Si on protège les parties de chaque chose, en fait, chaque partie est poussée par le vent. On ne protège rien quand on pense qu'on agit avec force. Il n'y a que le mouvement. Le reste, c'est l'illusion. On croit qu'on est fort parce qu'on a peur. Et comme on a peur, on développe des muscles. Il n'y a que le mouvement.
Hello.
So my questions, what advice would you give yourself with the current knowledge at the beginning of the pandemic? I remember a day, about 2 days into the beginning of the confinement. I was in Portugal, and actually it was just before we went into full lockdown, and we were in a hotel. About 6 in the morning, I noticed that everything went, all the electricity and the power in the hotel stopped and went off. There was an aircon that suddenly stopped working, and I remember feeling a total sense of panic, because at that point, when we didn't know what was going on, I thought, okay, so it's one thing for us all to be shut away in our little homes, but if we can't communicate and connect with each other, if the internet goes down, if there's no power and electricity and so on, we're really screwed. And I felt a real sense of panic. So that didn't happen, of course, and I think, but it made me feel very afraid. I think one of the things I'm feeling now, although so many people have been through so much hell, that it's important to try and stay cool and calm and look to the positive things, and hope that you'll come out of this in one piece. Is life today different from 6 months ago? Yes, it is. I think so many things we took for granted, so many things about making plans about the future, that we assumed we could travel from A to B and see people we wanted to see when we wanted to see them. Those things have become much more questionable, and I value the friendships I have so much more profoundly, and I miss the people I cannot see. And I hope to be in a place in the future where we will be able to freely move around and be together. And what kept you going during the pandemic? Well, really, it was food, I'm sorry to say, and an amazing Turkish series about the Ottoman Empire called Magnificent Century, all 139 episodes of it. I think getting lost inside other worlds, like reading a big fat novel or watching an incredible TV series, or even not an incredible TV series, was something that sustained us, because there was a point where it felt like we didn't know what to think about the future, particularly as an artist, as a choreographer. I didn't know when I was going to work again. All the projects I was doing were cancelled, and it felt like, in some ways, the world I'm invested in didn't feel very high on the list of priorities in governments, and so we didn't quite know what the future held. And onions and garlic, they kept me going too.
Yeah, my question is, what is the worst thing about the pandemic for you? The worst thing I remember was the situation when the pandemic started, the lockdown started, that I was always talking to people, to my colleagues, to my friends, to a lot of people, what we can do now. Yeah? I make some proposals and so on, but the reaction was, no, we do nothing. We stay at home. It's dangerous to do something. We stay at home. We stop all things. We stay at home. No, please, no proposals. Sometimes some colleagues get really angry that I made proposals. They say, no, that's too dangerous. It was a real hard situation for me, because I recognized if there is a real danger, I'm alone. I have only to wait for the end. Yeah, that was the worst thing about the pandemic for me. that there was no discussion, no chatting, what we can do. Instead of all problematic situations, instead of all, instead of all, what we can do. That was my interest to discuss, but that was no, that was not a common position. They were at home and stopped doing. And I was in my studio as an artist and do a lot. Okay, and then the other point is there were a lot of colleagues in the hamster wheel. No? They did a lot of things which makes not really sense. Yeah? For me, in my point of view, because they do not really recognize a changing situation. They do only this hamster wheel because they are trained in doing hamster wheels. So I'm unsure if it's clear. On the one side, people who stopped thinking about any future, only at home with family, isolated, that's good, that was their future in a way. And the other were only hamster wheeling this virtual, digital, streaming things. But there was no discussion what makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
What significance does a virus have for you? And I thought, like, growing up as a trans woman in this society, I kind of still grew up, even though it's already like, you know, the 2000s, with the HIV and a kind of fear of the HIV, like not going with the new knowledge on this virus where you can just, you know, live a normal life, but still having this constant fear to be infected by it. And growing up with it, virus to me means something that takes your body, that makes your body kind of dirty, that brings you guilt. And I grew up with this feeling of guilt, like, or the fear of being guilty to get tested HIV positive, which was quite a huge fear in my youth. And now there is something going around, also a virus that might catch my body, which I cannot really be guilty for. Like, I mean, you're not guilty for getting tested HIV positive, right? But there's this stigma on being infected due to sex, and now it's due to breathing. So it kind of changes my connection to what a virus is, because it shows like a virus can be anything. It's not showing it to the society, it's just showing to me, making me understand or making me feel, because, you know, I understood it very early. It's not being guilty when you catch a virus. But now I can feel it, and it kind of relieves me knowing there's this huge pandemic around, and it kind of, you know, makes the fear of the HIV thing less. So I'm having quite a time, I feel now, in front of the camera, thinking about the significance a virus has on me. And I think virus, the word and the possibility to be infected by a virus, any kind of virus, is quite big in my life. And I'm afraid of being infected. This is what I can feel. Thank you.
Yes, my question is, what did you learn in the pandemic, and do you want to integrate this into your life? Yes, I learned during the pandemic that in 2 months, maybe 3 months, the world could be changed. So I think that the idea of a general strike is back in my system of thinking. Because if we can manage a general strike in 2 or 3 months, only 2 or 3 months, then we can really be strong and change the world.
va mettre ça ailleurs.
Ça va? Ok.
Oh là là.
Et you can start whenever you want to.
Pardon?
On commence?
Si vous voulez.
Mais bon, je suis toute seule pour parler.
Oui, absolument.
Oui, c'est
Alors, il faut
pas
commencer.
entreviste. Non. Mais je peux.
Oui, je préfère.
Ouais, ok.
Je me sens moins dans...
Ouais,
Mais là,
ouais.
ils m'entendent, là, je suis plus filmée, là.
Non, oui, ça
commencé.
marche. Donc,
Alors, je pars de cette phrase. Le Covid-19 nous apprend-il quelque chose? Et j'ai répondu, le besoin des autres. Et c'est vrai que quand j'habitais dans ma petite maison sur la rue, j'avais tellement besoin des autres que le matin, quand je me levais, j'ouvrais ma porte, très grande, et les gens, très peu de personnes passaient, et quelquefois il y en a un qui s'arrêtait, qui venait dire bonjour, et j'ai créé ce que j'ai appelé le seuil des palabres. C'est-à-dire que devant ma maison, j'ai mis une chaise, pas sur le trottoir, mais sur le seuil. Moi, je me mettais contre ma bibliothèque dans ma maison, c'est-à-dire au moins à 3 mètres de distance, et je discutais avec des gens comme j'ai jamais discuté dans les temps normaux. Donc voilà, je vous livre ça. Pendant le confinement, j'ai créé le seuil des palabres. J'ai fini. On est là?